bonjour.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to visit here and to present few elements regarding the issue of creating collective memory and history about the landing in Normandy. Thank you for the will for potential comparison. And to finally present this very long history of these 70 years, which at the end in Lower Normandy or future Normandy, we have received an experience, and this experience and its creation, and all the different stakeholders that have contributed to create this experience. All the different stakeholders which have enabled the creation of this experience for Lower Normandy, and the dynamics of memory and history regarding the landings in Normandy and D-Day. These are the elements that we are going to present together with my colleague Pierre. We successively give each other the floor in order to explore this construction of memorial tourism, the problems, the education related to these issues, and to see if there is a certain number of elements. Of course, we will not educate you or tutor you. We will at least try to see, to find certain examples which will be useful regarding the visits that we yesterday had, because yesterday we visited Bitola and Novaci, and we tried to research different venues that are related to these battlefields of the First World War, to see how in the end, in a situation which would be similar to those in Lower Normandy that followed the landings in Normandy, to see if there are any connections in terms of creating sites, museums, and at the same time to create a tourist dynamics. Of course, certain elements will be visited and emphasized. I would also say that this would take into consideration the number of people to establish economy around the issue, not only Normandy, but also other issues that are related to the description of the cultural heritage from UNESCO, to explain that this was a phenomenon that took 70 years to develop, to bring it to the situation where we are at the moment in Lower Normandy, where we still have not passed all the stages, because there are still many issues, although we can be considered as an area which is a referent regarding these issues. Just few elements to establish the context and the historical context, so that I can later dwell on these issues, to explain the issues of tourist dynamics and the problems that we are still facing today. Since the end of the Second World War, there was a dynamic of commemoration, of transfer, which very quickly occurred in Lower Normandy. A feeling or an identity, in a way, a feeling of belonging to this territory was constructed around this history. The memory was a contributor to this. This is an economy which in Lower Normandy is established and still very much influenced and related with this history, this memory. And today we are at the transfer between history and memory, with the demise of the last participants who have experienced this history. We are in a process of evolution, and the will that Lower Normandy had for writing itself down in the World Heritage of UNESCO, especially of certain places. Sabine Guichet-Lebelli will also talk about this issue, including the inclusion of the World Heritage of UNESCO. So these are mainly issues that we want to raise about the Eastern Front and Macedonia. However, few reminders about history, because it's important to have these elements in mind. Few crucial ideas and issues that we need to point out, that we are still questioning some points today. This vision that seems as a shared vision around this history and the great manifestations that occur every anniversary. For example, the 70th anniversary in Lower Normandy, which was truly commemorated, not only in Normandy but also all around France. The same happened during the 50th anniversary. So all these expansion of these events, the media coverage, the crescendo which culminated with the 70th anniversary. Despite all of this, there are still historical questions which are of huge importance and which give a sense that since the beginning of the liberation, these are questions that we pose to ourselves, and these are questions that are part of the collective memory of the regions, of the individuals, in a sense that this is built both on the part of the individuals and belligerents to see how this memory was reconstructed and what are the differences regarding the different participants. Today we have established the idea that we have before and after the D-Day, but this is not the sole great battle of the Second World War. There are also Stalingrad, Leningrad, the battles on the Eastern Front, and sometimes these battles are forgotten. Therefore, it is of huge importance to remember that besides the fact that the Battle of Normandy and D-Day were the crucial moments of the history and part of the collective mythology and part of a joint gesture, that this idea is basically the foundation for human rights and for freedom, to establish that this idea that with the young people who on the 6th of June 1944 participated in this battle and faced all this barbarianism, this has helped us to show, and Pierre will also talk that that the media have also had their contribution about the Battle of Normandy. So a few reminders regarding the people that have carried out the landings, the Operation Neptune, with 200,000 people who have participated, a huge army of people, over 11,000 planes, the 7,000 ships that will cross the channel, and 156,000 soldiers who would actually land on the 6th of June 1944 and who would on this day participate in the battle. It is also important to see that this day, 6th of June 1944, is part of the collective memory, and we often forget that the hundreds of days of battle of Normandy, this is a concentration of the history, practically, which makes us forget what followed afterwards. Another element that I would like to mention in order to explain what we have in the collective memory is the feeling or the idea that the Battle of Normandy For example, here we have the Americans who contributed hugely to this battle. Of course, their role cannot be neglected, but there are also 73,000 British soldiers compared to the 59 American soldiers who have also landed on the 6th of June. And this is also a fact that is not so widely shared in the collective memory. There are huge amounts of films, for example, Saving Private Ryan, or the Longest Day by Spielberg, and other series which show us that there are a lot of contributions to the collective memories that show that not only the Americans contributed to this liberation, but there are over 17 nations that participated in the operations of the 6th of June and in all these 100 days of battle. There are huge numbers. There is a huge concentration of people, a battle that was forced by the moment of history. And this is also the sentence that Eisenhower mentioned when talking to the American soldiers before their embarkment. He said, "You will land and go into a great crusade in which we have put in all our efforts, and the hope is that these people are liberated." When we are talking about a huge crusade, this is an element that remains rooted in this idea that on the Normandy beaches, truly we're talking about human rights. And these human rights were put into question. And they, in a way, strengthened the idea of righteous war, which is also a war for democracy. In terms of writing down the Normandy beaches and localities into the UNESCO World Heritage, it tells us what lessons can be learned from what occurred there. Therefore, around this reference point, when we are talking about the return of democracy and human rights, we find it in the words of General Eisenhower. These are moments that are jointly shared. Nevertheless, there are issues that should be looked into, issues that we have not yet posed, which, above all, and the point of view that we need to give to this history. Of course, 6th of June 1944 will liberate France and Normandy and will contribute to the liberation of Western Europe. However, for some historians today, it is important to pose the question whether or not this was a diplomatic step forward, because the whole eastern part of Europe was liberated in a military sense of the word by the Red Army. However, what occurred later as the Cold War is yet to be put into question, and to see the success of these landings. The questions that we pose today are also the violence of war we showed in terms of being valiant what went on during the war. We showed the heroes, the Americans, who were ready to sacrifice themselves for freedom. There will be also an illustration of the American cemetery with these 9,300 graves made of white marble. There is still something which is very strong, very powerful. What we see with the youth of these youth from America ready to sacrifice themselves. There is a statue of a young American soldier who comes out of the water from the troops that landed on the beach. This statue, which is beautiful, celebrates the young American soldier. This statue practically makes us forget the violence of war, the crimes that have been committed to the body, to the soul, including the violence and the crimes suffered by the local citizens, because 20,000 were killed in the bombings. These aren't the issues that we are posing to ourselves. At least not that often. We only started asking these questions since 2004. A museum in the city of Valais will be opened, supported by the city of Caen, which will be this museum will be devoted to the civil victims. Of course, this is of huge importance, and I'm sure that you in Macedonia, especially regarding civil victims who have survived the First World War, you also pose yourselves these questions, and it is very interesting to research this, and there are many different questions that we have forgotten. For example, those for the role or the importance of the French resistance regarding what was going on in Normandy. Issues that are sometimes on a mythological level, some expanded visions on the importance of certain elements. For example, those regarding the floating, those regarding the raspberries. These raspberries were created very fast, very fast and very quickly by the British and the French sector. And in La Manche, there is one of these raspberries still floating. There is a museum which was opened in Normandy to remind us about this huge operation in terms of the liberation of our country as well as Europe. And this is the first museum that was opened on 6th of June 1954. Even if you visit it today, you will see that this floating pier enabled the passing of war materials for this battle in Normandy. But the historical reality, when we see all these materials, to see how huge they were, and everything that was used to transfer to France, because the Americans didn't have such pier, because theirs was destroyed by a storm. All this has shown the fact that lots of material was transferred by the British sectors. However, sometimes there are legends, and these golden legends, including even today, they are transferred from one place to another in history, and they're transferred also to history, such as this history of this museum of the landings on La Manche. If we have a historical analysis even today, including the fact that we should see this objectively as historians, we should pose the question why Normandy was chosen. Maybe the reasons were obvious because for the landings to happen in Normandy. However, the landings could have happened easily in the north of France, or it could have happened in Brittany. But what seems logically today didn't used to be so then. Here is a map to have into consideration what I'm talking about. This is a map which shows the landings from the British aspect. So we start from Perhaps I spoke in length, but I will show this very briefly. For example, we were talking from the British point of view about the different beaches, Utah, Omaha, Juneau. This is 100 kilometers in length. Why am I showing you this map from the British sector? Because this is a joint history. This is common history, which is important to have in mind. Here is another map which shows the different operations very briefly. And finally, this collective memory, which remains around the 6th of June. Of course, 6th of June is a very important date, but these are hundreds days of battle, and over 100,000 soldiers lost their lives, were injured, or went missing, and there are 400,000 prisoners of war. But regarding the battle, regarding the battle from the Eastern Front, it isn't the same ratio. And what is important is to realize that very soon, and which is a phenomenon in itself, which has been constructed since the end of the battle. So we have begun having an exhibition about. We had a dilemma: what memory to share and what to represent, what has happened. Since the 22nd of May 1945, there was a committee about the landings, which was chaired by the prefect Raymond Triboulet, which was one of the first prefects that were installed by General de Gaulle after the liberation of France. He became a member of parliament on the 21st of June 1947. He actually adopted a law which institutionalizes the memory of the 6th of June. So there is a procedure, including the National Assembly and the members of parliament. So on the 6th of June, they've adopted this law to commemorate the Battle of Normandy. This committee, in order to establish to structure all the events of 1944 and other structures which were important still in 2003, the association Normandy Memory is also related to this. A few numbers before I give the floor to Pierre to say, just to mention that there are elements in this memorial tourism which are important for our region. In France, this type of tourism brings 7.2 million visitors, around 45 millions of turnover. And the localities related to the tourism have around 1,500 employees and 3,000 seasonal workers, 6.2 million visitors from 100 to 150 localities. There is a concentration of such localities. The most important ones are close to the beaches in Normandy. I will briefly show you these localities, and you can see these elements in the document that I will send you. But what should be remembered is that since 1980, this memorial tourism is being developed. We talk about tourist filial which is related to memorial tourism. We have over 5 million people who visit these venues related to D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. You will remember that in Macedonia you will have at least as many tourists that are going to see these battlefields. I don't know whether this would be viable or not, but what you should remember is if you have over 100 million people who visit these venues nowadays. After this was after, but after the liberation of Normandy, it was only a handful of war veterans who visited them. So it is a long process to reach such tourist venue, which represents 31% of the overall number of tourists that visit Lower Normandy. For example, visiting different venues, for example, the American Cemetery, which are reference points for the visitors. In Colville, this is the most visited place in Normandy. In Normandy, there are a few economic figures, 124 millions only for one of the departments, which hosts most of the venues that have great economic income. You have also many foreigners who are part of the tourists who visit these places. This is a very popular tourist offer, and it's a process which took time to develop. And it is a huge contribution to local economy, and thus poses the question for joining the UNESCO World Heritage. So what are the criteria for being part of the World Heritage of UNESCO? We have the fourth and the sixth criteria actually are those related to history and related to values, symbolic values, peace, freedom, human rights, reconciliation. Of course, this is very important. You must remember that UNESCO has never put battlefields in the cultural heritage, and this would be a first time. The importance of commemoration, the remembering of these dates with lots of chiefs of states. Why do they come and visit in Normandy? Why, in their national history, this represents a huge historical moment. These are the problems that Sabine will discuss. Two more maps that will show you that today, I don't know if it is clear enough on the slide, two maps which show the sectors that are today maintained after a huge amount of work of localizing and precising with tampon zones. We also work on classification of the sea areas together with these greater areas where there are leftovers of buildings and materials. And we think that these should be classified on a new list of UNESCO World Cultural Heritage. I would say that these areas are on very special places with plans for conservation, which are support for us to complete this project. And by decision of the Ministry of Culture, the beaches of the landings are on an indicative French list of goods of heritage. What I mentioned from the battlefields from the First World War in cooperation between France and Belgium are on such list. It does not mean that if you are on such list you will be chosen to be part of UNESCO World Heritage, but it is an important stage which can help you reach the desired aim. Now I give the floor to Pierre.
Je vais être extrêmement bref. Je voudrais juste revenir sur...
I'll try to be really brief. I would like to briefly go back to what happened over the past 70 years, what was happening. We spoke about cultural tourism, but I have to highlight that this has been ongoing for 15 years. As it was already mentioned, And as it has often been mentioned in, say, cinematography, in literature, there have been many different initiatives. Sometimes they are political, such as the establishment of the Liberation Committee that Marc was discussing. It is an act that is of political nature in order to mark mark France's renaissance after a period of turmoil. It was opened in 1954, and it focuses on military acts. There is no analysis of these acts, and these acts are not glorified. There are other initiatives of either the previous soldiers or former soldiers, or other initiatives coming on behalf of individuals or collectioners who would like to present some things, open a debate, and see what would happen. Here in the bottom you can see people presented who really like debating about these issues. There are also the American cemeteries in Colville, for example. Then the beaches of the descent, and we should not forget about these places where the soldiers fought back, and the German cemeteries with 22,000 graves. These memorial sites that really leave a deep impression, and that are mostly in mountainous regions, and in our country they are mostly beaches where we develop various activities. All of this is in order to respect, to honor this place, but also to pay tribute to former soldiers. In a period of 30 years, we mostly remembered and honored these military acts, and these events were glorified. However, since the 1980s, things changed to some extent. I'm trying to draw a parallel with what is going on today. You can see the picture in the bottom. You can see President Mitterrand, who reconciled with the belligerent, and we are starting to think in a different manner now. We created the Memorial Center in Caen, and we are trying to have a comprehensive analysis where we would like to include things and put them in perspective, all these events that happened. In addition, we also get involved in putting up signposts along the roads so that people would know what kind of territory is present in that region, the landscape in the region, and people are given the possibility to connect all these sites related to the landings. So this is how the overall process was developed. So, just as Marc said, remembrance is very important, and you can see pictures presented here on this slide where the belligerents came together from both sides. We can see President Putin here, Chancellor Merkel as well. The Russians read things in a different manner, as it was already mentioned. They believe that the Battle of Stalingrad has a different value or importance. Another thing that is important is how you convey things and how you present everything. Here we can see soldiers from Colville, and all together with the opposing parties or opposing soldiers. The reconciliation phase comes later on. Therefore, we often ask the question about this importance and how it is passed down. We have to find a way how to pass on this knowledge and this physical heritage that is part of the memorial tourism to the next generations. Surely the state has a role to play. With regards to the English Channel, there are residues and vestiges that no one knows how to preserve right now. So this is a very important issue that is imposed on us. So what do we do with cultural heritage in the future? We address this issue by trying to describe the landscape and to describe it at the UNESCO World Heritage List. But to that end, we need all stakeholders to participate so that future generations would be able to preserve this memory, but also to continue researching and exploring these events. At the very end, I would like to conclude that remembrance is not history. History means precise analysis of facts. On the other hand, remembrance is something that, and memory is something that changes in time. And we can see that in this process that has been ongoing for 70 years. We can see that remembrance and memory is some kind of a political and social construct. Therefore, I would like to thank you for your attention.